that digital assessment provides teachers in order to free them up to be able to do the things that teachers really need to be doing, and that is teaching. And when you've got a really huge class, how wonderful to have assessment that's actually taken away from you so that you can actually be freed to teach. There are, of course, all sorts of limitations that can take place with technology that we are aware of. And so, for example, a lot of people are eager to point out to us, oh, but you can't assess essays. Well, curiously, in the United States at the moment, there's a lot of discussion going on about a program that is being developed and is being implemented in a number of states that actually is marking essays. Now, some bright spark came up with the idea that if you were to create an essay which really was a whole lot of rubbish, and what he did is he examined what the algorithm marked as correct, and then he created dummy text that would fool the computer into believing that it was accurate. And very proudly contacted the developer of the algorithm and said, hey, well, look here, clearly we can't use this. And I was very pleased to hear that the algorithm developer said, well, actually, anybody who had the ability to create the text that would confuse the computer in such a way that it thought it was marking something that was good doesn't need to be doing the test in the first instance. And I think that's the point. We can't constantly be checking and questioning things. Sometimes we've got to experiment and see where things are going. So obviously going online with things like Google Forms, etc., as well as other systems, is going to enable teachers to be able to do a whole lot of positive things. We then move on to classroom management and content delivery. And obviously, in terms of using a learner management system, that this will enable the teacher to do a whole lot of really positive and exciting things. And we've spoken about content delivery in terms of being able to provide ebooks and various content. Just a quick, if you speak to Rufus after this, he'll tell you about a free app that you can get called Test Yourself, which provides the ability for kids on a mobile device to be able to check themselves from grade 4 to grade 12 across all the subjects to see where their learning is taking place. So this sort of content is really important and valuable. What we need to be very careful of, I think, though, is that for the next while, we're going to have to work carefully about making sure that teachers don't become overwhelmed with the quantity of content that is out there if they have the connectivity that they are working with. So we move then on to the notion of classroom instruction and curriculum. And this is probably where you think, aha, he's finally starting to talk about his topic. But before we do, I'd like us to just skim through a little bit of research that's been taking place. Kolb in 2018 points out that historically, technology, integrated learning has not been considered essential. Many educators have found that they are able to meet the content-specific learning goals without the aid of technology. And if you think about the number of teachers who, where you say, oh, but let's introduce the technology, and they say, well, aren't my matric results good enough? So what we need to be doing is looking at how it is that we can actually get teachers to see that using the technology is going to enable them to do even more than the good that they're currently doing. Colin Mishra of the TPAC framework fame said that historically when new technologies are introduced, they tend to continue the stability and transparency of the traditional classroom. Digital tools need to create disruption and add a new level of complexity. Now, if you think about something like a data projector, all that a data projector does is it manages to keep the teacher as the sage on the stage. Inevitably, the learners are still sitting there as completely passive participants in a production that the teacher has created, and there's been absolutely no change that's taken place. And more importantly, we're not looking at the complexity of being able to assess effectively whether or not the learners are actually achieving the outcomes and goals that we want. Rias and Zaman in 2013 reported that we mustn't assume that technology alone will magically catch up students who have less content knowledge or be able to differentiate to meet them where they are. And this is quite chilling because often when speaking to teachers, we hear the notion that technology is going to be able to leapfrog the learners from a place where they're at into some exciting new future. But research is showing more and more that unless learners have prior content knowledge, they're not going to be able to make that sort of jump in any meaningful way. So it's not just about throwing the technology into the classroom, it's about making sure that the learners as well as the teachers are very much well prepared to be able to take on the challenge that that is going to give them. And then in research going back to the 1990s, says that technology can increase student engagement or motivation. However, it's also uncovered that student engagement does not necessarily lead to positive change in student outcomes. And this was studies that was based on a 10-year study. Now, yes, we're 20 years later, and obviously the technologies have changed, but I'm worried that we sometimes get excited about the idea of engaging and motivating the learners, and we don't see the outcomes that we really want to take place. So, I've given you pretty much all the negative that you probably can take, haven't I? So, where does that leave us? So the instructional choices that teachers make. The instructional choices that teachers make when integrating technology that determines how deeply students are embedded in the learning process and their long-term retention of the content goals in the experience. It's their choices that the teachers are making that is going to make the difference. So again and again, I'm hoping you're seeing, Dr. Greer spoke about it, Ms. Kessler spoke about it, the idea that the teacher plays the absolutely central role in the entire process. So we need to be careful about what we do about tossing technology and ideas into the mix if we're not actually working where we need to work. So in terms of what this means, is we need to make sure that we have a really solid background for the teachers. And I think what we're having coming forward from the Department of Basic Education with this professional framework that they're working with, where they've identified 13 competencies that teachers need in order to be able to use digital learning effectively, is a really important goal that we all need to become involved with. Because if we want teachers to develop the professional skills in order to do digital learning effectively, what we need to do is to make sure that we've put in place everything that the teacher needs. And obviously, one of the key elements that the teacher is going to need is a set of learning theories in our country that actually underpin what's happening. We cannot just add digital learning on as though it was some sort of piggyback animal within the education system. We need to rethink education in such a way that digital learning is simply just an element of the process. It's not some extra special element. I look forward to a time that we're not having ICT summits, but that we're having education summits where we can actually become talking about the whole of education, not this glorious little thing that we can add on. And unfortunately, I think companies outside of education, Dr. Greer, have a negative role to play in that oftentimes CSI seems really cool and easy because all we have to do is pop into a school and drop off a few tablets or drop in a few computers and A for away, off we go. Then pedagogies need to be part of that, and it's the pedagogies. Remember, a pedagogy is everything the teacher believes, does, and thinks in the classroom. The pedagogies need to be aligned with this new education system that we're talking about. Then we need infrastructure. We cannot be talking about an exciting new way of teaching and learning if our infrastructure isn't right yet. Mud schools cannot hold the technology that we're talking about. Schools with holes in their roofs and broken windows cannot keep the technology safe. Once we've got that that's when we can start bringing in the devices, because it's at that stage that we can start seeing exciting things. Verizon in the United States has just introduced a really exciting opportunity. What they do is when they donate tablets, etc., they also donate a set of professional development for the teachers in the school as part of the package, so that those devices can actually go somewhere. Then we've got to talk about content, which we've already mentioned, and we finally end up with connectivity. Now, connectivity, as has been said, is a key element. It's not constantly required, and there are little workarounds that we can work with, but if we're truly going to be able to explore the absolute joy of what this all involves, we need to be taking a look at it. So, as part of the process, I want us to spend a few moments thinking about what this means for the teacher in the classroom. Now, when I trained to be a teacher in the 1980s, I was taught very particular things about myself. I was taught that I was the person who had the knowledge. I was taught that learners were going to learn from me. And that set up a whole series of power relations, etc., etc. I was never taught properly how to use a chalkboard, which is probably one of the oldest pieces of technology in the classroom today, and is still not being used properly by most teachers. I was never even taught how to use an overhead projector or a television. What we're expecting now is for teachers to be able to use technologies that are way more advanced than turning on an overhead projector. But the truth is that the ease of implementation can be seen in some sort of sliding scale from very easy to very hard. And what we need to be doing is to work really hard to make sure that we're listening to the teachers. Because what the teachers are saying when you go out and talk to them are things like, I'm afraid of making a fool of myself, of losing my job, etc., etc. And in order for us to address that, what we need to be doing is we need to consider what it means for a teacher to undergo that change. It's not easy to take a teacher who's been trained to be the sage on the stage and tell her that it's all okay to go and be the guide on the side, as we would have it in technology learning. It's about understanding the whole mindset change that's required. Teachers are also particularly concerned about the fact that the majority of them who've recently graduated through a Bachelor of Ed degree did actually know or very little learning when it comes to how to teach in a digital environment. So what we need to be doing then is we need to be providing the professional development that Dr. Clear referred